An arrest in a nearly 40-year-old cold case means a local family is one step closer to justice. 22-year-old Ronna Bremer disappeared in 1988 from her home in Christian County. Tonight, her husband is behind bars. He is now accused of killing her and her unborn child.
3 years after 22-year-old pregnant mother Ronna Anne Bremer vanished 5 days before Christmas, a human skull arrived anonymously at a sheriff's office in the next Missouri county. No public explanation identified the sender or where the skull had been found. A forensic reconstruction was shown across the country, yet the skull remained unidentified for 10 years. When dental records finally gave it Ronna's name, the case opened onto conflicting accounts, an alleged confession, and evidence preserved since 1989. Nearly 38 years after Ronna disappeared, that evidence led to an arrest, but not the one the case's most dramatic allegations seem to predict. For evidence-led cold cases that still demand careful answers, subscribe to Archive Without Answers. Before Ronna became the subject of a decades-long investigation, she was a young mother beginning a new chapter far from the Iowa communities where she had grown up. Ronna was one of 2 daughters born to Ronald and Mary Ann Waller. Her sister, Deanna Stevens, remembered a happy childhood, riding bicycles to an ice cream shop, then exploring country roads on mopeds when the girls were older. She described Ronna as sweet, sassy, carefree, and fun. Ronna graduated from high school in Essex, Iowa. By December 1988, she was married, raising a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and approximately 7 months pregnant with her 3rd child. The family had recently moved to Ozark, a small Missouri community south of Springfield. 5 days before Christmas, Ronna disappeared. The date was December 20th, 1988. According to the account her husband later gave investigators, the couple had argued that night. He said he left their home on foot and planned to wait outside his workplace until it opened the following morning so he could collect his paycheck. At approximately 10:30 that evening, Ronna reportedly telephoned her sister-in-law, Barbara Gray. She asked whether her husband was at Barbara's house. Barbara said he wasn't, and that she then sent her own husband, David Gray, and another brother-in-law, John Simpson, to search for him. At first, that appears to create a simple timeline, an argument, a husband walking away, and relatives trying to locate him. The accounts of the people involved, however, did not fit together cleanly. The stated outcome of that informal search was that David and John did not find Ronna's husband and eventually returned home. Later recollections, however, made it difficult to determine exactly where they had gone. John Simpson remembered visiting Ronna's home while they were searching. According to John, David eventually dropped him off before they ever located the man they were looking for. David gave a different account. He denied going to Ronna's home that night and denied finding her husband. Ronna's husband offered his own explanation for how he returned without the relatives locating him. He said he became cold while waiting near his workplace, returned home during the night, and fell asleep in the living room with the 2 children nearby. According to him, he did not realize Ronna was missing until the following morning. A memory from inside the house further complicated that timeline. Ronna's daughter was only 3 in 1988. Decades later, she told investigators that she remembered a vehicle arriving and her mother saying words to the effect of, "There he is," apparently referring to her father. Ronna then went outside. If that recollection is accurate, the arriving vehicle may have been connected to her father's return and Ronna's departure from the house, but the memory came from someone who had been only 3 years old, and it was related many years later. It cannot establish who was driving, who else was in the vehicle, or whether the person Ronna went outside to meet was actually her husband. The public timeline does not reveal exactly when the relatives abandoned their search, how Ronna's husband returned, or precisely when Ronna left the house. What it does establish is that these were 2 separate searches. During the night, relatives had been informally looking for Ronna's husband after he walked away. By the following morning, according to his account, he was back inside the family home, but Ronna was gone. He then reported her missing, and the official police search for Ronna began. She had left behind 2 very young children only days before Christmas. Investigators found no convincing reason she would abandon them without contacting anyone. Police had no body, no established crime scene, and no reliable account of where she had gone after the telephone call. Suspicion existed, but suspicion did not tell detectives where to search or whom they could prove was responsible. As the weeks passed, the investigation produced no public breakthrough. In 1989, while Ronna remained missing, her husband filed for divorce. It was granted in May 1990. That legal action may appear unsettling in hindsight, but it did not establish what had happened to Ronna. Then, in 1991, the case took a direction no one could have anticipated. The Greene County Sheriff's Office, next door to Christian County, received a human skull from an anonymous sender. Later reporting said the skull had been found in a wooded crevice, but the person who discovered it was reportedly too frightened to approach police openly. Authorities sent the skull to a forensic specialist in Colorado. A clay reconstruction was created to show how the unidentified woman might have looked in life. The face was shown nationally in the hope that someone would recognize her. No identification followed. Historical reporting later said the reconstruction did not resemble Ronna. That failure left two investigations moving separately. Christian County had a missing pregnant mother, while Greene County had the skull of an unidentified woman. Whether the skull was compared with the dental records of known missing people in 1991 remains unclear. Public reporting has also never adequately explained why it stayed in Colorado for approximately a decade. At this point, which clue would have pulled you harder? The conflicting accounts from the night Ronna vanished, or the anonymous skull in the next county? Tell me which one you would have followed first. In January 1997, more than 8 years after Ronna vanished, a judge declared her legally dead. Her family still did not have her remains or a confirmed account of what had happened. The identification finally came in 2001. Acting on a tip, Christian County investigators obtained authority to retrieve the skull from Colorado. Dental records established that it belonged to Ronna. The discovery answered one question and immediately raised several more. Someone had apparently located Ronna's skull years earlier and chosen to mail it to a different county. The remaining parts of her body, and the remains of her unborn child, had not been recovered. The skull alone could not publicly establish where she died, how she died, or who had placed her remains in the woods. Then the same period produced an allegation that appeared to point toward one member of the extended family. An unidentified witness told investigators that David Gray had allegedly confessed to choking a woman inside a vehicle. The witness also claimed that his girlfriend had found the skull near property associated with David and mailed it anonymously because she was afraid. If true, that account could connect a reported confession, the skull, and one of the conflicting stories from the night Ronna disappeared. Yet each part depended heavily on the witness's word. He did not claim to have seen Ronna's death, and no public forensic evidence connected David to her remains. David denied killing Ronna. He denied making any confession, denied going to her home that night, and said he had not known that her skull was reportedly found near his property. Investigators now had Ronna's identity, a disputed allegation, and several accounts that could not all be accurate. What they still did not have was enough evidence to bring a murder case to court. The file was reopened and closed more than once. Investigators conducted another series of interviews in 2016, but no arrest followed. Every passing year made the witness memories older, while Ronna's family continued without her remaining remains or an explanation. In November 2024, Christian County detectives reopened the case again, this time with assistance from the documentary series Cold Justice. The team returned to the family accounts instead of treating them as a settled timeline. They spoke again with the witness who had made the 2001 confession allegation. According to the program, his central story remained the same more than 20 years later. Consistency can make an account worth examining, but it does not independently prove that the alleged confession occurred. The investigators also revisited the search for Ronna's husband. John Simpson maintained that he had gone to the home before David dropped him off. David continued to deny going there. Ronna's daughter repeated her childhood memory of a vehicle arriving before her mother went outside. The documentary team eventually concluded that two people may have been needed to move and conceal Ronna's body. By the end of its investigation, the team believed a case could be considered against 2 family members. A local prosecutor agreed to review the information. That was a television team's investigative assessment, not a charge and not a verdict. Still, its work helped place an old case back before detectives and prosecutors, at a moment when the evidence could be examined in a new way. Something collected in 1989 had survived. Public reports have not identified the item. Authorities have not said where it was recovered, what biological material it contained, or whose profile analysts were attempting to isolate. What they have said is that modern testing produced information the original investigation could not, and that the result was considered alongside renewed interviews and other traditional police work. Detectives traveled to Iowa and Nebraska, revisiting the places and people connected to Ronna's earlier life. They also reportedly located a record showing that her husband had once been arrested in Iowa in connection with an alleged domestic assault involving Ronna. The accessible public record does not reveal the date, circumstances, or outcome of that arrest, so it cannot responsibly be called a conviction. As the interviews and testing came together, the investigation moved away from one earlier allegation and toward the man who said he had returned home and slept beside the children without realizing Ronna was gone. His name was Joel Lake Bremer, Ronna's husband. On July 24, 2026, a Christian County grand jury reportedly indicted Joel. U.S. Marshals arrested him in Kansas City on July 31st. He was booked into the Christian County Jail on August 2 and appeared in court the following day. News reports say Joel faces 2 counts of second-degree murder, one concerning Ronna and another concerning her unborn child. His bond was set at $200,000. Joel Bremer has not been convicted in this case. An indictment means a grand jury found sufficient basis for charges to proceed. It does not establish guilt. At the time of this recording, no plea had been publicly verified, and the prosecution's evidence had not been tested at trial. Joel's later criminal record will inevitably affect how some viewers see the accusation. Court records show that in 2001, he pleaded guilty to sexually abusing his minor daughter and received a prison sentence. He later pleaded guilty in a separate federal case involving possession of child sexual abuse material. Those are established convictions. They are also not proof that he killed Ronna. The present charges must stand on evidence connected to her disappearance and death, not on an assumption that one offense automatically establishes another. And that brings the case back to the evidence from 1989. Some reports say modern DNA testing tied Joel to the investigation, but authorities have not publicly provided enough detail to evaluate that statement. We do not know whether the evidence came from a home, a vehicle, clothing, or another location. We do not know whose biological material was tested, the strength of the reported association, or what innocent explanation the defense may offer. It would therefore be premature to say DNA proved who killed Ronna. The more accurate conclusion is that modern testing of preserved evidence, combined with new interviews, helped prosecutors reach the point where they were willing to present a case to a grand jury. There is another unresolved issue. The earlier documentary investigation publicly examined both Joel and David, and a witness continued to allege that David had confessed. Yet only Joel has been publicly charged. David has denied involvement, and no publicly released evidence establishes that he assisted in Ronna's death or the concealment of her remains. Based only on what is public now, which issue must prosecutors explain first? The physical evidence, the conflicting timeline, or why the earlier confession allegation pointed somewhere else? Tell me which one, and why. The arrest changes Ronna's case, but it does not complete it. Her cause of death has not been publicly established. Investigators have not disclosed where she died, what happened after her final known contact, or what led to her death. The identity of the person who found and mailed the skull has not been officially confirmed. Most of Ronna's remains are still missing, and no public account explains how her skull traveled from a wooded crevice to a neighboring county's sheriff's office. There is no established motive. There is no publicly verified confession from the man now charged. And until the evidence is presented in court, The precise reason a grand jury acted after nearly 38 years remains partly concealed inside the prosecution's file. For Ronna's family, the indictment represents movement after a lifetime of waiting. Her father died without seeing anyone charged. Her mother also died before the 2026 arrest. Her 2 children grew up without knowing what happened after their mother disappeared days before Christmas. Ronna deserves to remain more than the anonymous skull that exposed the failures and possibilities of this investigation. She was a sister who raced bicycles and mopeds along Iowa roads. She was a young mother raising 2 children, preparing for a third, and trying to establish a home in a new community. At 22, almost every part of her adult life should still have been ahead of her. The skull identified by dental records proved that Ronna had not simply walked away. The witness accounts showed that someone's version of the final night was incomplete, and the preserved evidence finally gave prosecutors what they believe is a path into court. Whether that evidence can prove the charges beyond a reasonable doubt is now the question that matters. Until a courtroom answers it, Ronna Bremer's case has an accused person, but it does not yet have a verdict. For more victim-centered cold cases, followed carefully from the first contradiction to the final unanswered question, subscribe to Archive Without Answers.